What is up, everybody? Chris here for Fake Sports News, back at it again with another video. Today I'm going to be bringing you guys a quick recap as to what happened during today's matches, that of course being day 1 of the Stage 5 Major, as well as what you guys can expect going into today's matches your time, that of course being day 2 of the Stage 5 Major. Now, kicking things off, we of course had the Seattle Surge taking on the Paris Legion. You guys know I was expecting the Seattle Surge to walk with a 3-2 victory. I thought this series would be very close since this is an elimination match, and both of these teams didn't qualify for champs, so loser goes home. But the Seattle Surge made very quick work of the Paris Legion. They beat them 3-1, and they looked really dominant in all the respawns. Because we have matches, I don't want the video to be terribly long. I'm going to try to speed run my analysis of each of the maps from, of course, today my time, so we can just get to the preview for tomorrow and make that a little bit longer, give you guys a little bit more analysis since it is a major. So with that in mind, I'm not going to cover maps that were like a super blowout. Like map 1 was obviously an insane blowout, 250-86. Surge comfortably won map 1, Raid Hardpoint. And of course, going into map 2, it was an S&D on Raid. And the Legion walked away with the 6-2, another blowout, so I'm not going to look in depth at that. But we'll go to map 3 and look at the stats here. It was a 3-1 on Garrett. I think it was Garrison Control. Yeah, it was Garrison Control because I was really baffled that they let Gary Control through, even though Surge were 3-0 against Legion on it. And I don't know if they've ever gone to a round 5, but that's another aside for another time. Looking at the stats, Classic had a 0.76, Octane had a 1.29, Persini had a 1.44, and of course, Gunless had a 1.19. And Paris, everybody played okay. Not the best, but not horrible either. Scraps had a 0.76, Aqua had a 0.89, Temp had a 0.82, and Zap had a 1.05. So Paris were within striking distance really throughout the entirety of this game, but they just couldn't pull it out. And then looking at map 4, of course, that being an APOC hardpoint, this is Persini's playground, and Octane really went crazy. He didn't have a lot of engagements. He was 13-5, but, I mean, he just played really well. Same with Persini. Persini was absolutely having on his playground. He had a 1.46 and 3,500 damage. And then his SMG duo in Classic, he played very well today as well. He had 3,800 damage on map 4 and a 1.12 KD. So looking at the series stats, everybody on the Seattle Surge did very well. It was a very even contribution across the board. Everybody played well. Nobody really got carried. Classic had a 0.95, Octane had a 1.28, Gunless had a 1.24, and Persini had a 1.38. So a great series from Gunless, Big P, and of course Persini. Gunless, Big P, and Persini. What did I just say there, ladies and gentlemen? Octane, Big P, and Persini. My bad. That was a little slip there. On the Paris side, Aqua had a 0.95, Scraps had a 0.73, Temp had a 0.75, and Zap had a 0.95. So a very great showing for the Surge. Obviously, they can build off of this. And going into today's matches, I think they'll carry that momentum into, of course, the losers bracket, and they will make the run that I've been telling you guys about since yesterday's video. Now, looking at our second matchup of the day, we had the New York Subliners taking on the LA Gorillas. You guys know I was expecting this to go 3-1 in favor of the Subliners. The Subliners, fun fact, have actually never beaten the Gorillas on an S&D up until the game 5. So they had a mental block there against them for some reason, or the Gorillas just, game planned very well. Their coaching staff is very robust. They have a really large coaching staff. So potentially their coaching staff just wins this engagement in the S&D department, but obviously that's no more since the Gorillas are not in champs contention. But enough of that into the series. So looking at the game 1, it was a Gary hardpoint, 250-178, very close. Asim had a 1 KD, Diamond had a 1.16, Mac had a 0.76, and Hydra was absolutely having with a 1.42. And then on the LA Gorilla side, the only player that went positive was Adam Assault with a 1.14. So really on the Subliner side, the slang power was definitely there. Asim and Hydra, the SMG duo. Of course, Asim went even, but he had 5,000 damage, so he was just contributing all over the map and playing his role. And then on the AR side, Diamondcom really carried the weight for Mac. Mac had an off map, but it happens. So great showing for the Subliners. And looking at map 2, that of course being the Moscow S&D, it ended in a 6-4 for the Gorillas. You guys know I was expecting the Gorillas to take map 2. Like I said, the Subliners have never actually beaten Gorillas in a map 2 S&D. So I was expecting that to continue today, and it indeed held. So Silly had a 2 KD. He went 10-5. Mental had a 1.17. Great to see that he had a good map. And App went even. And then on the New York Subliner side, the only player who got positive was Hydra with a 1.5. I'm not going to show the stats for this map just because you know, it wasn't necessarily the closest S&D. It was relatively close, but pretty much a blowout from the Gorilla side. They were in control the entire time. Speaking of blowouts, Checkmate Control was a 3-0. No point looking at stats there. Mac and Hydra had matching 1.58 KDs. Diamond Con had a 1.38 and Asim had a 1.25. So it was just a good old-fashioned beatdown. Looking at the map for APOC Hardpoint, we of course had the Subliners losing this one 250 to 238, even though they went up 178 to 67. Yes, the Subliners blew an 111-point lead. You're hearing that correctly. And they actually lost the game in the end. I didn't understand. I lost all composure at that point. I didn't know what was going on. I was like, and then it happened. So looking at the stats, Asim had a 0.88, Diamond had a 1.15, Mac had a 1.08, and Hydra had a 0.59. And then on the Gorilla side, Mental went absolutely mental. He had a 1.3, Silly had a 1.18, App had a 1.28, and he went full donk mode. The guy got full streaks. He went on 2 9 sprees. I mean, he was going crazy. 5,000 damage, you name it. The guy did it all. And then on the New York Subliner side, you see Asim here had 5,500 damage almost. Crazy showing from him. He played his heart out this series, and that's what helped him to get the win ultimately. And then on the game 5, of course, that being S&D on Express, this is a map that the Subliners are pretty comfortable on, but they haven't really been performing well on it as of late. And somehow they're able to eke out the victory here with a 6-4 scoreline, behind a really strong performance from Asim and Hydra. So the SMG duo just came to play in the game 5, and that made the difference here. On the LA Gorilla side, the only player who had a really encouraging performance was Adam Assault with a 1.57. But on the Subliner side, Hydra had a 1.33, Asim had a 2, and of course Diamond went even, and that's how they got the win. So, excuse me. Looking at the series stats, everybody on the New York Subliners, with the exception of Mac, went positive. Asim had a 1.06, Diamond had a 1.14, Mac had a 0.99, and Hydra had a 1.11. Then on the Gorilla side, Mental had a 0.99, Silly had a 0.89, Apathy had a 0.95, and Assault had a 0.9. It's crazy to see that Mental somehow outperformed App KD wise, even though App had like more insane performances in some of the maps. I know obviously it's a little bit of a smaller sample set for Mental since he had fewer engagements, but I kind of would have expected some of Apathy's like monster performances on the tail end of the series to carry over to the KD department, but I guess he just went neg in some of his maps. But enough on that. I don't want to take up too much time talking about a random little tangent. Looking at the map 3, excuse me, looking at the third series, you guys can see on my head, you see the sad FaZe fan thing on my head. I mean, I'm sad, man. It was a bad thrashing. Like, we got whooped. I mean, Minnesota Rokkr said, y'all go on and get that switch from the tree, and you know what comes next. And, you know, we got a whooping. That's what it is. I mean, that's how we do it in the South. They said, go on and get you a switch, and we got the switch, I guess. So looking at the map 1, that, of course, being Checkmate Hardpoint, FaZe almost brought it back. Rokkr, I mean, they just were off to the races from the get-go. Looking at the stats, RC's at a 0.76, BZ had a 0.87, Cell had a 0.67, and Simp had a 0.93. This is really one of the first times I can remember, at least in recent memory, where all the FaZe players went negative and no one was really even sniffing out a 1 KD. Like, no one was remotely close to a 1 KD here. The closest player was, of course, Simp with a 0.93, but you know, usually they're close to at least going even if they're getting like mollywopped like this, but they just got dominated. There it is. On the Rokkr side, of course, Sandy had a 1.15, Major had a 1.56, Priest had a 1.04, and Attach had a 1.29. So really, really even effort across the board from the Minnesota Rokkr. The SMG duo of Sandy and Attach went absolutely bonkers. And then Major was just going crazy map 1. I mean, he was set up in the right positions, and he was just playing really well. So very typical performance from, of course, the Minnesota Rokkr, and that carried over into the map 2, that, of course, being Express S&D. RC's at a 0.83, BZ had a 0.67, Cell had a 0.78, and Simp was the only player positive on the ATL FaZe side with a 1.25. Now on the Rokkr, Sandy had a 2.4. The guy went 12 and 5. Sheesh! Priest had a 1.22, Major had a 0.67, and Attach had a 0.63. So the Rokkr took this in round 11. It was pretty surprising to me. The round 11, it was just a really good play call from the Rokkr and a great counter. FaZe didn't have a good response, and that's how they ended up losing it. But FaZe was able to bounce back map 3. They 3-0'd the Rokkr on Gary Control, which isn't really too strong of a takeaway because FaZe has been, without a doubt, the best control team in the game since really the outset of the season. And Rokkr has been a really, really bad control team, especially in the last few weeks. They've been a little bit more consistent in the last couple of weeks. They've been winning against some of the bottom tier teams, even teams like Florida, who are pretty solid in the game mode, admittedly. But they're just not known as being a control team. And in the map 4, of course, that being raid hardpoint, excuse me, the Rokkr were able to close it out behind a very, very strong break on Basketball Hill, or P5, if you will, or excuse me, P4, to close out the game. I wasn't expecting the game to end on P4. I thought it would end on P5 like it typically does, and maybe within maybe like 5 or so points. But the Rokkr just said hell no, and they closed the series out 3-1. So hats off to them. A very typical performance. Looking at the stats for map 4, RC's had a 0.79, Abizi had a 0.89, Cell had a 1.05, and Simp had a 0.75. And then on the Rokkr side, Sandy was absolutely having a day. He had a 1.59, Priest had a 1.33, Attach had a 0.89, and Major had a 0.71. So looking at the series stats, Atlanta FaZe, they just got dominated. RC's had a 0.93, Abizi had a 0.87, Cell had a 1.07, only player positive on the team, and Simp had a 0.89. So this is really a throwaway series for the Atlanta FaZe side, in my opinion. They didn't really play their game, and they didn't play to their ability. They didn't look like themselves, and they weren't playing as a team. And they played one of the more complete teams in this game, and it came back to bite them, right? Looking at the Minnesota Rokkr side, Sandy had a 1.19, Priest had a 1.21, Major had a 0.94, and Attach had a 0.91. So honestly, if I'm the Minnesota Rokkr going into our series against the Dallas Empire tomorrow, I mean, we have all of the momentum in the world, right? Like, we just beat the team who has only lost 5 times this season. We just handed them their 6th loss. So great takeaways for the Rokkr. And going into their series against the Empire tomorrow, I think they have a very strong chance to win that series, but I don't think it's very, very likely that the Empire lose that series. I just think FaZe had a really off day, and they didn't come out as to the best of their abilities. And I also think that Rokkr just played really, really well today. They played some of their best Call of Duty on the year. Sandy and Priesta really had their best day in a long time. They're really great players, but they don't always have the most consistent performances. And today they just played like Sandy and Priesta the entire time, and it was absolutely amazing to watch. Even though I'm a FaZe fan, you got to tip it. Those guys are such hard workers, and they've just been knocking on the door all year long. So I'm happy to see that they were able to pull it together, and they were able to handle business when they needed to. So hats off to the Rokkr, and I think this will chain into their really the rest of their major run. Looking at our last matchup of the day, we of course had the LA Thieves taking on the Toronto Ultra, and you guys know I was expecting it to go 3-1 in favor of the Ultra. I just thought they'd be too much to handle for the Thieves in the respawns, and barring a really strong performance on map 1, I didn't see the Thieves winning any of the 2, 3, and 4 maps, right, in the series. But of course, the Thieves did win 1 and 4, so that's how we were able to force to a game 5. I wasn't expecting the Ultra to lose 2 hard points, but you know, the Thieves really came to play today, and that's how they ended up winning those 2 hard points. So looking at our first hard point, that of course being raid hard point, the Thieves won 250-167 behind a very strong performance from Slasher, Draza, and John. They were all frying the entire map long. Ken was keeping up. He was playing very well, but it was just a great team performance from the Thieves, and that's why they won this map. I mean, they just came out frying as a team. They looked great, and I was happy to see them take this win. John had a 1.26, Draws had a 1.21, Ken had a 0.95, and Slasher had a 1.24. Then on the Ultra side, Insight went even, Cammy went even, and then Bance had a 0.62, and Kleenex had a 0.86. So the SMG duo got tucked in this map, and that's really the story here. Looking at the map 2, that of course being Moscow S&D, it was a 6-0 for the Ultra. No point in going over those stats. Looking at the game 3, that of course being Gary Control, this was another 3-0. Thieves didn't win a single round. No point in looking at that one. Looking at the game 4, that of course being Checkmate Hardpoint, this was 250-207 in favor of the Thieves. Obviously, you guys knew that. As I said, the Thieves took both hardpoints, and you probably watched the match yourself. So looking at the stats, of course, Inside at a 0.95, Bance at a 0.67, Cammy at a 0.89, and Kleenex was the only player who really played well with a 1.26. He was doing it all on the map. He was streaking. He was getting really crucial 2 and 3 pieces to break hills. He was just playing very well, and he didn't have the support that he needed to get the Toronto Ultra over the hump, especially at P5 going into P1. That chain was really what broke the game for them. They could have brought it back and won, but, you know, the chain didn't work out well, and that's where the game was lost. Looking at the Thieves side, John had a .79, Draws had a .8, Canada 1.08, and Slasher 1.57. Honestly, I feel like the subs on the LA Thieves side in this match, they just played very selfless, and they played their roles perfectly, right? Like they were pushing up train. They were pushing up top lane, getting plane control. They were playing bottom lane a lot, getting plane control. They were playing alley, getting alley control. I mean, they were just all over the map, really being annoying, being nuisances to the Ultra. And that's what you need, right? To beat this Ultra team, you need your SMGs to go crazy and to really just be on the ball that day. And that's what happened for the Thieves in maps 1 and 4. And that's what made the difference in the series. Took it to game 5. Now, speaking of game 5, in that game 5, the Ultra won 6-3 against the Thieves, excuse me. Inside had a 1.2, Vance had a 0.57, Cammy had a 1.67, and Kleenex had a 1.33. And on the LA Thieves side, John went even, Draws had a 0.5, Ken had a 0.88, and Slasher had a 1.17. So it was a very, very even performance from everybody on the Ultra side in this map 5. They really brought it together. They played very intelligently as a team. They played numbers well. And Insight also had some really, really crazy 1v1 clutches. Yes, okay, that's what I meant to say against Ken, and that's what made the difference there. If a couple of those 1v1s go the way of the Thieves, I think this would have been a 6-5, or it realistically could have been a 6-4. There were about 3 rounds that the Thieves could have won, and if that happened, then this likely would have been a 6-3 for the Thieves, or possibly a 6-4, something. But the Thieves really had a few opportunities to close out very, very winnable rounds, and they just weren't able to capitalize on it. The Ultra played very well, and that's what you expect from a team who we all think is the consensus number 2. Number 2. Uh, Consensus is a funny thing, right? Dallas beat them at the last major, and they beat them in the stage, right? So it could be argued that Toronto is 3 looking to get back to 2. Now, looking at the series stats, Insight had a 1.19, Vance had a 0.71, Kimmy had a 1.2, and Kleenex had a 1.13. On the LA Thieves side, John had a 0.86, Draws had a 0.84, Ken had a 0.97, and Slash had a 1.15. So John had a much better performance in this series, and honestly, that is the difference that helped the Thieves get to this game 5. And most of their recent series, he's been not performing to the best of his abilities. He's been having like 0.6s, 0.7s. So it's been rough for him, but it's nice to see that he really got some footing in this matchup, and he had a decent enough KD, right? A 0.86 for a sub is very typical. It means you're playing your role, you're getting mixy, and you're winning a decent amount of your engagements, right? So great showing from the Thieves, and even though they got bounced into the losers, I think they will make a decent run, and I think they do have potential to upset some of our top teams in the losers bracket. They definitely are a very, very hungry beast waiting down there, and if you put your hand in their mouth, they will bite it off. So to all the teams that may drop into losers, be ready for the Thieves, man. Now enough about today's match. My time looking at today's matches. Your time, of course, as you guys can see on the screen, we're kicking things off with the Seattle Surge taking on the London Royal Ravens. And personally, I think this one will be a game 5, and I'll tell you why. I think that because this is the last game of the season for the Ravens, I think that they'll likely be playing up to Seattle's potential, really. I think they'll be playing up to their competition, if you will. And I think that they will push Seattle to a game 5. I think the Ravens are likely to take a hard point. I think they probably steal a hard point. And if they're lucky, I think they steal this. I don't think they win the second hard point. I think they probably steal the hard point in the Surge. They might go up 2-0 in the series, and the Surge might get a gentleman sweep. Or they might win a control. Who knows? Maybe the Surge will fall in control. London do seem to be a pretty solid control team. Last time we saw them in control, they looked pretty good. And I think if Shawnee and Alex give consistent performances, then the London Royal Ravens have a very strong chance to take this series. But realistically, I don't see Lantane, Landless, Landstini, and Lasic, or Landsick, whatever, losing the series. Famous last words, right? But I think Surge win at 3-2. I don't know where Ravens take the maps. I think they will upset probably in map 1 and likely in map 3 if they're going to take another one. Otherwise, I think it's 3-1 for the Surge. But out of respect to the Ravens and the fact that this is likely to be one of these teams' last appearances in the CDL this season, I think it's a game 5. Now, looking at our second series of the day, this one's going to be a little bit harder to work out. The Mutineers, in their last matchup against the Rokkr, they really showed me something that I wasn't thinking of too heavily, and it's the fact that when they do outslay teams, they're still barely winning. I think it was Enable who talked about it in one of his videos. The Mutineers are one of the few teams that I've seen where they outslay teams, and still find a way to lose, right? Like when they played Minnesota, they were outslaying them at some points. And then when they couldn't outslay Minnesota, they started losing like really badly. So it's very dramatic when, when Florida is not able to outslay the other team, because when they can't outslay, they have a lot of trouble just closing out maps. So with that in mind, I think that because the New York Subliners aren't playing with Clayster and they're kind of playing with a pickup squad with Diamond Con for the time being, I think that against a really solid team like the Mutineers, the music stops, right? Like they almost lost to the LA Gorillas, a team who hadn't won a single hard point in stage 5. They were 1-19 in their previous 20. And of course, the Subliners were the team to make it 2-19. So going into their matchup against the Mutineers, that's not very encouraging. And just their team chemistry, it didn't look to be as good as it could be. Obviously, you can attribute that to just a short practice turnaround. But as it stands, every day you have to play the person that's put in front of you. The Mutineers are the team that's put in front of them. I don't see them getting past the Mutineers, so I'll call it a 3-1 for the Mutineers. I think that likely if the Subliners are going to win a map, they'll probably win the opening hard point. Mutineers will likely come out a little bit slow, and then Mutineers will snap, and they'll gentlemen sweep the rest of the way through, giving them a 3-1 victory. Now, if the Subliners do come out and play exceptionally well behind strong performances from, of course, Mac and Hydra, those are my two X factors I'll be looking at, then I think they will win this series, but I think it'll be a 3-0 if the Subliners come out really hot, because Florida's a team that tilts, right? Like, if you catch them on a bad map and you just get them down bad, I mean, it kind of rolls over sometimes. So if I'm having to trust Florida to make the reverse sweep or to come back or regain, I don't have a lot of faith in it. No hate to those guys, but the tilt factor is just very strong in that team as far as I've observed. So I think if they go down in that hole, it's going to be difficult. They can do it. Havoc's a great IGL, don't get me wrong, but the likelihood of it happening, I just don't see it happening. When their chemistry gets thrown off, they're off. So there it is. I think it's a 3-1 for them, most likely, but there is upset potential if Subliners come out and really play their game. And Hydra has one of his performances where he really just showcases how much generational talent that he is in this league. But I don't think that realistically happens. So we'll say 3-1 Mutineers. I think their teamwork, their chemistry, and just their form, right? Like they lost their last matchup to Minnesota, and that knocked them into losers. They would have been 4-1 otherwise. So I think coming into the major, they'll be saying, hey, Minnesota's a good team. We tried to tell you guys when we lost. It wasn't like just us being bad. It's Minnesota getting really good out of nowhere. They just beat FaZe. So I think that's going to be their argument going into tomorrow. And I think that tomorrow they will rebound and they get that 3-1 and they move on to round 2 where they'll face the Thieves, I believe. I think it's the Thieves. So looking at our next match, we of course have the Dallas Empire taking on the Minnesota Rokkr. And personally, just because the Rokkr beat FaZe doesn't mean that they will beat Empire. I think Empire is the better team between Rokkr and Empire, of course. And I think this series is going to be very, very volatile. I think honestly it could go either way, but as it stands, I think it's a 3-2 for the Empire. I think because this is their first match back on land since the last major, there's going to be an adjustment period, right? Like one of the maps that they would typically win, I think they'll lose just because this is their first rep. And you know how that is. They're easing into it. But as it stands, I think Empire, they are the better team. I think their S&D is better than Rokkr's. I think their respawn is better than Rokkr's. But I just think that Rokkr's in really good form. And their energy and their momentum is just undeniable right now after beating FaZe. So I think with that in mind, they will carry that into tomorrow's series. And I think they're likely to take a couple maps off the Empire. But I think the Empire walk away with the series just because they are the better team, in my opinion. And in our last match of the day, we had Toronto Ultra taking on Optic Chicago. And Mano Manischewitz, I am really not sure what to think about this series. Based on how Optic ended Stage 5 with the loss against Thieves in a reverse sweep, I think that tomorrow they will beat Ultra, but I do see there's obvious upset potential from a team like Ultra who's so strong and who matches up with Optics so well, right? I mean, Bance and Kleenex are good counters to Scump and Envoy, and then Insight and Cammy are, of course, good foils to Dashy and Formal. So it's really a great mirror matchup on all ends. But I just think Optic in their current form, I think they're in their final form, man. I think they're hitting their right form at the end of the year. And also, like, come on, guys. Come on. I mean, my hands are tied here. Like, we're in the Optic jersey. I can't say Ultra in an Optic jersey. I'd be the biggest, like, douche on planet Earth. Come on now. So I'm saying, I'm saying all that to say, hot take. I think it's a 3-1 for Optic. I think this is where they really get it together. Phases and losers. This is the momentum that they need. I think with that sign, they're going to say, this is our major. This is our major to lose. We're coming out. We're 3-1ing Ultra. We're booking our ticket to the winners finals. Dallas Empire. We'll see you fudging later. We'll see you on Saturday. We'll play you. We'll take your hearts. And we will absolutely make our way to the winners finals. Excuse me, the grand finals, where they will face, but FaZe. FaZe is going to get back to the finals. It's going to be an Optic FaZe final. I'm calling it right now. I've already charted my bracket. I had Optic beating Ultra. I had Empire beating, excuse me, I had FaZe beating Empire. And then in the winners finals, I had FaZe beating Optic 3-1. Then I had Optic beating Ultra in the losers bracket again. And then, yeah, so my bracket's chalked after that Rokkr win. But I do think FaZe make their way back to the finals again, and I think they win the major this time. Since there's no advantage for winners versus losers, you just play less matches if you're in winners and you're iced. So it's a disadvantage coming through winners. FaZe is going to have to go through the passion pit, the CDL passion pit. And I think they get back to the grand finals. But I think this 3-1 victory for Optic will be a catalyst to a grand finals appearance. But I do think they beat the Ultra. The likelihood of Ultra winning, I think, is really low considering how they played Thieves today. If we're going to make a really light power ranking, I would say Optic played Thieves better than Ultra did, in my opinion. The hard points were at least much closer, and Optic was able to beat Thieves on one of their better hard points, and Ultra couldn't win a single hard point. So with that in mind, I think Optic has the edge in the hard point matchup. They will also be able to game plan, seeing some of Toronto's weaknesses against Thieves. They can exploit that and recreate it, right? The vetoes, if you recreate those same vetoes, those maps are all strong maps for Optic as well. So I think tomorrow Optic will have the advantage, and I think they win. I think they sweep the respawns, to be honest with you. I think likely Toronto take the search, as they are, in terms of power rankings, they are the #1 S&D team with advanced stats. But as it stands, Optic is a better ranked hardpoint team. They're ranked second, whereas Ultra is ranked third. And then they are also a better control team. I believe Optics ranked second, Ultra's ranked maybe third, something like that. But I think across the board, Optics a better team, and that's why I think they win 3-1. So yeah, guys, if you want a super quick recap, I'm thinking 3-1 Surge, 3-1 Mutineers. I'm sorry, 3-2 Surge, 3-1 Mutineers, 3-1 Empire, 3-2 Empire, excuse me, and 3-1 Optic. So 3-2, 3-1, 3-2, 3-1. Surge, Mutineers, Empire, Optic. That's what I'm thinking tomorrow. And I hope you guys enjoy all the action today. Hope you have a great morning, noon, or night wherever you may be on this beautiful planet. Don't forget to like, comment on this video, subscribe to the channel if you're brand new. And of course, yeah, I hope you guys have a great morning, noon, or night. Like I said, enjoy all the COD action and stay safe out there, everybody. Peace out.